Our top story tonight, there's still no suspect in a series of bizarre murders that have plagued the Southland. Many locals continue to insist that the killings are the work of a boogeyman of urban legend known as the Jackface. Police have declined to comment about the rumor, but have advised all Angelenos, and especially those in the Santa Clarita area, to stay indoors after dark and to keep all windows and doors shut and locked. For more on the story, we go to our reporter on the scene, Ashley Edwards.
Latest on this case?
Well, we don't have any new developments. We are getting some leads practically on a daily basis. Progress is steady, but unfortunately is slow.
And how much participation are you getting from people in Daytona on things they may have seen or heard about this case?
Like I said, we're not getting as much information as we would like. We are getting a lot of tips through our crime line, but we wish it were more.
Rod Wheeler, looking at this situation, so far it's been 3 prostitutes who have been the targets of this guy. How do you go about tracking him down, and do you think he's likely to strike outside of that mode?
Well, Martha, I can tell you that the Daytona Police Department are probably doing everything that they possibly can, and from
so stupid. Look at you. No, you can't. Stupid. Boys into the cars. Jump in.
When the news question is when it triggers.
The CIA has been involved in assassination and torture behind the scenes all through its history.
At least at the time, any amount of energy.
Advancing the idea that using LSD to alter people's consciousness for mind control experiments was legitimized and reasonable and a good thing.
Hot focuses 3.6 million watts and squeezes it into a billion-watt or gigawatt beam.
How do we know what we're doing when we blast the upper atmosphere with a huge amount of energy?
And yet when they return to the United States, this altered consciousness will be triggered to remember everything they collected.
At least a tiny amount of energy when it triggers.
And ideally, you want to affect those magnetic field lines.
Hello, I'm your host V. This is my documentary, 5th of November movie, Know Their Killers. Of course, this is part of the targeted individual documentaries that I'm doing here on the True Pharmacy Productions. And, well, it's been a fun ride, but we're only halfway through, as it turns out that we're getting more and more information, and we're having to make more documentaries. We want to complete the subject matter here. We don't want to miss anything. This is going to be a full saga as far as the crimes that are being committed against humanity by our governments. And so, one of the biggest things going on right now is the whole, well, gun control issue. And I say that because it's definitely a weapons issue. I'll say that. And it's not from who we think it is. But it's really all about these shooters. These mass shooters, not just the shooters, but any of the killers. They're doing these mass killings. Now, a civilian doing mass killings is something of a new modern day age concept. I mean, I know there's like Jack the Ripper and stuff like that, who was a speculative Freemason. But we're not going to get into that. Instead of me ranting in between these clips, I'm going to try to keep this very short because I want to make this a single part documentary. No part 1, part 2 for this. So, people are saying that these killers, these mass killers, these mass shooters, are trying to catch a crazy plea when they say they hear voices. I don't know. I think that the owner of LRAD would say something different about that.
The question is, where is the sound made? Instead of being made on the face of the cone, it's made at literally billions of little independent points along this narrow column in the air. And so when I aim it towards you, what you hear is made right next to your ears. I said we can shorten the column. We can spread it out to cover the couch. I can put it so that one ear hears one speaker, the other ear hears the other. Because the sound is made in the air along this column, it does not follow the inverse square law, which says it drops off about 2/3 every time you double the distance. 6 dB every time you go from 1 meter, for instance, to 2 meters. That means you go to a rock concert or a symphony, and the guy in the front row gets the same level as the guy in the back row, now, all of a sudden. So again, this idea of being able to put sound anywhere you want to is really starting to catch on. It also works for transmitting and communicating data. It also works 5 times better underwater. We've got the military had just deployed some of these into Iraq, where you can put fake troop movements 1/4 of a mile away on a hillside. Or you can whisper in the ear of a supposed terrorist some biblical verse. I'm serious. And they have these infrared devices that can look at their countenance and see a fraction of a degree Kelvin in temperature shift from 100 yards away when they play this thing. And so another way of hopefully determining who's friendly and who isn't. We make a version of this which puts out 155 decibels. Pain is 120. So it allows you to go nearly a mile away and communicate with people, and there can be a public beach just off to the side and they don't even know it's turned on. We sell those to the military presently for about $70,000, and they're buying them as fast as we can make them.
So, people can be made to think things that are happening that are not. That's a very interesting concept. Oh, that's the neighbor banging on my walls. That's the neighbor trying to disturb me. Oh, I've got people yelling outside my apartment. Oh, I'm just going to go crazy. I'm going to go on a shooting spree. Right? So, I think that Americans, oh God, Americans, you have been dumbed down. You have been cultivated into the most non-critical thinking people on the planet. Here, this guy is giving away military secrets, and all he can do is laugh. Like, that's just so funny, right? Well, how funny would it be if something like this happened?
Grandson attempts to murder grandparents, receives 9 years. A judge has sentenced an 18-year-old man, identified by his last name Lee, to 9 years for the attempted murder of his paternal grandparents. During dinner one evening, Lee had unexpectedly attacked his grandmother with a kitchen cleaver and then attacked his grandfather. The two grandparents were able to subdue the crazed 18-year-old who continually yelled that he only wanted to drink their blood. After being arrested, a psychologist was called to assess Lee's mental state. Lee explained he'd been a victim of domestic abuse when he'd lived with his mother, and was finally abandoned by her to his grandparents. He said he often heard voices telling him to kill people and to drink their blood. Lee said he could silence the voices by drinking his own blood, but that evening the voices had been too demanding. The psychologist determined that Lee suffered from a previously undiagnosed schizophrenia and a personality disorder. The judge took this into consideration when he sentenced Lee to 9 years in jail for the attack on his grandparents. Lee will also receive psychiatric counseling while in prison.
Now let me go ahead and trash the hypothetical behind that, even though it was an animated clip that actually happened. And so we have to look at the situation with this information of the mind games that the military can play on people. And it's not just the military, I want to let you know. CIA, NSA, FBI, even down to local police have this technology. Separate operators, people that are in corporations doing their own thing, trying to manipulate people into buying stuff. There's so many uses for this stuff. But let's go into the deadly aspect of this.
It's December 2016. What I've got here is 100% proof that James Holmes was targeted and hit with wideband audio weapons. It's called a ultra wideband, and it pulses audio to a person for the intent of driving them insane or mushing them up so they can set them up for stuff, or as a revenge weapon. There are a lot of people targeted. I implore you to research it and see. All the symptoms are always the same. This is taken from the first police interview, and this is 100% real. I've been doing audio for over 20 years. I pulled this out of, these signals are pulled out of the first police interview with James Holmes. It's imperative that you listen to this and really listen to this. These signals and these sounds are not loud in the original police interview, but they are there, and it proves 100% that he was targeted, just like a lot of other people are targeted, are claiming. I would find it impossible that James Holmes could magically project his schizophrenia sounds onto a recording device. These recordings get into everything. When you or your home, your area is being hit by these audio signals, they really do, they saturate everything. They get into every electronic and recording device, whether it's wireless, whether it's digital or analog. It can be a Sony Handycam, an old school tape deck, laptop, computer tower, cell phone, tablet, old radio, AM radio, television. Everything gets affected by this stuff. There is evidence everywhere when you're recording. So everywhere that James Holmes went that was recorded, there's evidence being caught. You just have to be able to pull it out of the audio.
Okay, so James Holmes was a targeted individual. And now I'm going to go ahead and throw out the misnomer of psycho mass killer. These people were not killers. Not by their own volition, not by their own nature. These people were driven to do what they did. So they are, in fact, targeted individuals. So, yes, James Holmes was a targeted individual. And the electronic aspect of this is something that I will get into with another TI who records this stuff. And she does it on a volunteer basis to help target individuals try to decode what's going on, as some of the stuff can be picked up in electronics. So, what other TIs out there that are still alive and did what they did and got arrested?
This, of course, is the case of Daniel Drayton, who was arrested in North Hollywood for allegedly kidnapping, raping, and torturing a woman here after he's accused of murdering a woman in New York. And after this interview, it is clear his mental health will likely be a big part of his defense. Calling himself a good person who heard voices in his head, accused killer and confessed serial killer Daniel Drayton, seen here being taken into custody last week in North Hollywood, spoke from the Men's Central Jail in downtown Los Angeles with the New York Daily News, an interview in which he admitted to killing New York nurse Samantha Stewart. I really liked her, Drayton told the Daily News. I didn't want to kill her. They told me she had to die. They would be voices in his head that Drayton went into further detail about. I'm a passenger in my own body, he repeated over and over. It's mind control. They use direct energy weapons on me to control my mind. Drayton said he suffered from schizophrenia and bipolar disorder and has admitted to several more murders, but police aren't sure whether they actually happened. Authorities were able to track Drayton from New York to L.A., where Drayton said he hoped his crime spree would come to an end. I wanted to get caught, he said. I took some of her things with me and used them. I kept my same phone. I knew they could track it. I didn't want anyone else to get hurt. Well, someone had. In North Hollywood, he kidnapped, raped, and strangled another woman, telling the Daily News he thought he had actually killed her until she stirred. He says he considered killing himself, but by then authorities had moved in and placed him under arrest. Now, after twice refusing to leave his jail cell last week to go to court, Drayton was finally arraigned on Monday, during which he pleaded not guilty.
The suspect in the dismemberment case of an 8-year-old boy in New York has been found competent to stand trial. Attorneys for Levy Aaron entered a plea of not guilty. He is accused of murdering Libby Kletsky after the child got lost walking home from day camp, asking for directions, then getting in Aaron's car. Authorities say parts of Kletsky's body were stuffed in a discarded suitcase and in a refrigerator. Court papers say Aaron told detectives he was hearing voices telling him to take his own life for what he did. Lee Powell, The Associated Press.
Jared Lee Loughner. Jared Lee Loughner reportedly started showing symptoms of schizophrenia while still in high school. In addition to writing and saying nonsensical things, his thinking was disorganized. He also developed a paranoid obsession with the US Constitution. On October 2, 2010, Loughner uploaded a video to his YouTube channel. It was the only video on this channel and is still active today. It's titled, America, Your Last Memory in a Terrorist Country. The background soundtrack is Drowning Pool's song, Bodies. The person in the video is presumably Loughner, who can be seen staggering towards an American flag, dressed in a strange combination of bin liner, hoodie and a mask. He then proceeds to set the flag alight. The video description is an odd rant about flags, birds, and the government. No further videos were uploaded to that channel, but Loughner created another channel called Class It Up 10, which is also still active. To this channel, he uploaded 5 videos ranting about various subjects, including terrorism, currency, literacy, and the government controlling people through brainwashing and mind control. The last video on this channel was posted on the 15th of December 2010, and less than a month later, on January the 8th, 2011, Loughner showed up at a Tuscan grocery store where Democratic Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords was conducting a meet-and-greet event. He was armed with a Glock pistol that he had legally purchased in November 2010, and proceeded to fire 31 random shots in approximately 30 seconds. Giffords was hit in the head and was one of the 13 people injured in the attack. 6 people who had been at the event were killed. After the shooting, investigators uncovered an envelope inside a safe at Loughner's house. Inside was the handwritten words, "I planned ahead, my assassination, and Giffords." Giffords survived the close-range shooting, but suffered life-changing injuries that compromised her speech, vision, and left her right arm and leg paralyzed. Loughner initially pleaded not guilty to the charges against him, which included murder and attempted murder, and after a mental evaluation that resulted in a diagnosis of schizophrenia, Loughner was declared incompetent to stand trial and was sent to a federal psychiatric facility for treatment. However, in August 2012, Loughner was cleared for trial. He ended up pleading guilty to 19 charges. In exchange for his plea, he was spared the death penalty, and the rest of his charges against him were dropped. He was sentenced to 7 consecutive life terms and an additional 140 years of imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Incredibly, the videos that possibly held clues to this tragic chain of events are still viewable on his YouTube channel.
Okay, I can tell you a little bit about the mindset of the guy in that last clip there. This guy was very disillusioned with the American government, federal government, as he understood what was going on with him. Now, let me tell you why he knew what was going on by adding in my own personal experience. When I was being hit with these voice skull technologies, synthetic telepathy, I was being given a story as to, who it was. Where you? It's where are the parts of you? No, I know myself quite well. Thank you. We're angels. We're angels of God. Yeah, bullcrap. Try again. We're aliens. And I'm going down the list of things where these people were trying to hook into me, because there's not too many things I believe in this world. I like to believe in the things that I see, I can prove, I can tangibly interface with. And so they went down this list, and then finally they said, hey, look, this is the NSA. We don't like you. We want you to die. Oh, it's like, finally, some answers, some honesty. That one I could believe. And so once I heard that, I started doing my research. Yep, everything matched up down the line. All right on down the line. So, as an intelligent being, as a sentient, intelligent, critical thinking person, I reverse engineered the interrogation AI machine, okay? So this person probably did the same thing. And yes, he was very angry. His constitutional rights were being stepped on just as mine were stepped on. A lot of Americans' rights are being stepped on because a lot of the stuff happening, and people, please don't think for 1 second the federal government gives a damn about you. They don't. You are the enemy. The Illumitards think there are too many of us on the planet. And even though that's not true, we have enough resources on this planet to support 100 billion people. It's their greed, because they already own half of the world's resources, the 1%. So this is the greed. And the cowardice on top of it, with the manipulation behind the scenes, with using the governments and the military. So this person understood, this target individual understood that it was the government doing this. And that's why he burned the flag. That's why he spoke like a patriot. Although he went into the wrong direction with his actions, he still did what he did, unfortunately. So I want to get into this Nikolas Cruz, what happened to him.
Nikolas Cruz was born September 24th, 1998 in Margaret, Florida. His adopted mother, Linda Cruz, was in the delivery room when he was born. She was filled with joy because it was one day shy of her 49th birthday. She and Roger Cruz had married late. He was 61 when Cruz was born and also had 4 kids from a previous marriage. Less than a year later, that same woman got pregnant once again. but by a different father this time. Linda and Roger Cruz were such good people that they didn't want to separate the two, so they adopted him as well, and his name was Zachary Cruz. They ended up having to pay $12,000 for Nicholas and $7,000 for Zachary, but when Zachary was born, their family was complete. Roger and Linda Cruz were described as good parents. They had a beautiful 6-bedroom house. Roger was in the marketing and traveled a lot for business, but when he was home, he was all about the kids. Linda was a stay-at-home mom and was always involved in the boys' activities. Roger was described as a great dad, a golfer, a student's high kind of man. I mean, he didn't even own a gun. He even built a wing house for the boys, where they could have somewhere to play. They raised the boys as Catholics, they had their first communions and confirmations, but their once happy family took an unsuspected turn. When Nicholas was just 5 years old, he went down to the den with his father. His mother was in the kitchen when Nicholas came down the hallway crying to his room. Linda asked, "What's the matter? Did Daddy punish you?" Nicholas replied, "Nope, Daddy's dead." Roger had suffered a heart attack. He was 67 when he had passed away. After he had passed away, Linda sued 2 heart doctors and won the settlement for her 2 sons. Nicholas wasn't an easy child growing up. When he was just 3 years old, he was diagnosed with development delays. I mean, this kid was diagnosed with so many disorders and conditions: depression, attention deficit hyperactive disorder, and autism. His mother even told deputies that he was obsessive compulsive disorder and had anger issues. He had counselors at school and at home. I mean, this guy was on so many meds. By the time he was in his late teens, he didn't even know how to do his own laundry. He was described as a mama's boy and a loner who didn't have any friends. I mean, the sad part is, his own little brother would bully him with his friends. I mean, to have your own little brother bully you is pretty degrading if you ask me. Nicholas wasn't the best son growing up. His mother would call the cops on repeated occasions, 39 times to be exact in 10 years. When he was just 14 years old, he hit his mother with the plastic hose from a vacuum cleaner. And just a few months later, he threw her against the wall for taking his Xbox away. When he was 15 years old, he punched a hole in the wall when she took it away again. When he was in school, he was always getting sent to detention for foul language, insulting teachers, being disruptive, and disobedience. This guy would disrupt the class so much that they had to change him middle schools in 8th grade. He ended up having to finish his junior high in Cross Creek Middle School, which was a program for emotional behavior disabled children. Nicholas never wanted to be there. On January 13, 2016, the district allowed Nicholas to enroll in Stone Douglas High School. It was regarded as one of the best high schools in the district. Once Cruz was there, he immediately started causing problems just 1 month in. He had posted a picture on Instagram that he had planned to shoot the school, and in one incident, he was punched numerous times by a fellow student for using racial slurs. He even had to jump off the back of the bus to avoid getting beat up. Cruz was so depressed, he tried to kill himself just 8 days before his 18th birthday by ingesting gasoline and said he wanted to buy a gun. And just 5 days later, Cruz had posted a video on Snapchat of him cutting himself. He also had hate signs all over his school binder, including Nazi symbols and the words that said, "I hate." Well, you know what the word is, and I'm not going to say it. This kid was so obsessed with guns and people getting killed, he wasn't fitting in Stone Douglas High School any better than he was fitting in anywhere else. One of the students said she would treat him with kindness and let him use her cell phone to finish assignments. And one day he came to class holding his crotch. She said she looked down closely and saw him holding a dead bird near his genitals. He would always kill animals and post it on Instagram. In January 2017, he stopped undergoing mental health treatment, and Linda Cruz sold their expensive home and moved Nicholas and Zachary to a smaller condo. A month later, Nicholas assaulted a kid at Stone Douglas High School and was expelled. Soon after, Nicholas was transferred to Broward Public Alternative School. And just 3 days after he was expelled from Stone Douglas High School, he went to a gun store and purchased an AR-15, the gun he used in the mass shooting. At the beginning of his senior year, Nicholas wrote on a Mississippi YouTuber's blog that he was going to be a professional school shooter. The blogger quickly alerted the FBI. Then in November, tragedy struck once again. Nicholas's only friend, Linda Cruz, had died of pneumonia. She was 68 years old. Cruz was devastated when she passed away. Him and his brother went to go live with a former neighbor named Roxanne Deschamps at her mobile home. And well, you could say Nicholas wasn't the modeled guest, quickly starting problems at his new home. Roxanne had to run errands, and Nicholas asked her to drop him off at a friend's house. And when she said no, he threw a tantrum and started punching the walls and throwing things. And when Deschamps' son intervened, Nicholas punched a 22-year-old boy in the face. Cruz then left the house, and once he did, she called the cops. Here's some of her 911 call.
In the backyard behind the fence digging for 15 minutes, and I'm positive that he hit a weapon. I'm positive that he hit a 9mm carbine in the back.
He put the gun in the head of his brother before, so it's not the first time. And he did that to his mom. His mom died.
And once Cruz left the house, he called the cops as well. Here's some of his 911 call.
An emergency. Hi, I was just assaulted now. Someone attacked me.
A call for help in Palm Beach County.
I don't know where I am. I'm new to the area. Gonna get me back. The thing is, I lost my mother a couple of weeks ago, so I'm dealing with a bunch of things right now.
Once everything cooled down, Cruz went back and apologized and hugged his champ's son. And the family begged sheriff deputies not to take Cruz in, but he was no longer allowed to live there. A family in Parkland by the name of Kimberly and James Sneed took him in and allowed him to keep his guns as long as they were locked away. Once he lived there, he ended up getting a job at Dollar Tree that would carry cash on him at all times, but would continue to wear torn clothes. On January 5th, a caller called the FBI and said Nicholas had posted on Instagram that he wanted to kill people, and she had feared for her life and others. She also stated that he had once pulled a rifle on his own mother. On January 14th, 2018, Cruz told the Sneeds that he wanted to skip school because it was Valentine's Day. And at 2:06, Cruz caught an Uber driver to Majority Stone Douglas High School. The Uber driver said he was carrying a large bag, but she didn't suspect anything because he had told her it was a guitar and that he was going to band practice. He arrived at Stone Douglas High School at 2:19. Once he got there, he went to the east side of the building and started loading up his guns. A freshman by the name of Chris McKinnon noticed him.
He started to take the bullets and load in the gun. I froze. He then said to me, "Get out of here. It's gonna start getting messy."
Where was he loading his gun?
On the stairwell, the bottom stairwell. He took it out of like a gun case that kind of looked like a guitar case.
Why do you think he spared you?
I don't think he was fully reloaded yet. I don't think his bullets were in.
Once he was done loading up his guns, Cruz then set off the fire alarm and started shooting into 4 classrooms. He then took a stairway to the 2nd floor and shot another student. As the students were going to lockdown to take cover in the classroom, some of the students jumped the fences and ran to a nearby Walmart. 12 people were killed inside the building, 2 outside, 1 in the street, and 2 at a hospital. Once Nicholas gets to the 4th floor, he drops his backpack and his rifle and runs down the stairs and exits the building. Around 2:28, Nicholas leaves the building and begins to blend in with the students. He ends up going to a nearby Walmart and buys a drink at a Subway, and then walks to McDonald's and orders a burger and eats it and leaves. A lot of the students identified the shooter as Nicholas Cruz. And once he gets out of the McDonald's, he walks out and a Coconut police officer spots him and notice he fits the description of the suspect. The officer approaches Nicholas and arrests him. He ends up having to be taken to Broward Health North Hospital because he had labored breathing. At 6 p.m., he ends up going to Broward County Sheriff's Office in a hospital gown and is escorted inside. And around 6:30, he tells police he is the gunman. The next day, Nicholas is held without bond. He ends up making his first court appearance via jail video. He had nothing to say except confirming his name and was charged with 17 counts of premeditated murder.
So many signs that the Florida shooter was mentally disturbed, even expelled for bad and erratic behavior. Neighbors and classmates knew he was a big problem, must always report such instances to authorities again and again. We did, time and time again. Since he was in middle school, it was no surprise to anyone who knew him to hear that he was the shooter.
Today, a Florida judge ruled a partially redacted version of the interview transcript could be released, offering the most disturbing picture yet of why Cruz may have opened fire, killing 17 people. The mass shooting sparking nationwide debates about gun control and mental health. In the interview, Cruz tells the detective he'd heard an evil voice inside his head for 15 years. When asked, "What does it tell you to do?" Cruz responds, "Burn, kill, destroy." The detective speaks with Cruz about the death of his mother months earlier. Cruz says he doesn't suffer from depression, but says he took drugs. A lot. No one knew about it, he says, admitting that he took marijuana and Xanax and had tried to drink himself to death. Cruz's attorneys had wanted the transcript suppressed, saying its release could hurt his right to a fair trial.
Now to the interrogation of confessed school shooter Nikolas Cruz. 12 hours of the interrogation video released yesterday, and today parents of his victims called for the resignation of Broward School Superintendent Robert Runcie. CBS 4's Carrie Codd caught up with them, and he has more tonight from Fort Lauderdale.
The interrogation video of confessed school shooter Nikolas Cruz lasts hours. On it, Cruz appears well aware of being on camera. He mimes shooting himself, he punches himself, and he talks to himself. He also tells BSO Detective John Curcio about hearing a persistent voice or demon in his head.
And what's the voice telling you?
But for Ryan Petty, the video is more than just another piece in the investigation of Cruz. Petty's daughter, Elena, died in the shooting at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School. Petty says the video and what Cruz reveals is also a teaching moment for the community.
And I think there are clues in the confession as to why Cruz did this.
Petty says despite talk of voices and demons, he feels the video shows Cruz was well aware of his actions.
What I saw was the shooter trying to come to grips, I think, with what he had just done.
Fred Guttenberg, whose daughter Jamie died in the shooting, said he has no interest in watching the video.
I don't need to see him pour out his thought process. He did it. He planned it.
My name is Nick, and I'm going to be the next school shooter of 2018.
Guttenberg pointed to the cell phone videos Cruz filmed prior to the shooting as proof of premeditation. For Guttenberg, the critical issue is bigger than Nikolas Cruz speaking to law enforcement after 17 people were murdered, 17 others wounded, and a community placed in crisis. He said it's about how the legal system failed and allowed someone with clear problems to get his hands on a gun.
Law enforcement, the school district, the FBI, the mental health community, people around him socially, everybody knew he was a threat to those around him, and there was no law in place to keep him from buying the weapon.
So I'm going to do a little breakdown for you here about the Cruz situation. Number one, he had autism. Now, I know what some of you people are thinking. Yes, I'm about to talk about vaccines. Now, the thing about the vaccines is that it reformats the brain with the aluminum injection, mercury, and the other things that should not be inside the brain. This is something I'm going to get into in the next documentary. So, actually, I'm going to skip that. The other thing about this is that he was taken alive. I don't know how many black men are gunned down for being suspected of having a gun when he only had a wallet or a cell phone. But this person was taken alive as to basically so his story could be told. Now, his interview was pressed because he spoke about hearing voices that he's heard for 15 years. Again, having the formatted brain of an autistic person, I mean, I say format like a computer because the brain is a computer. A reformatted brain that can be influenced by voices, beam energy to the head. And so it's really sickening. His interview was suppressed, but it was, I guess there are some good people in the justice system, criminal justice system, that let that information out. Okay? He tried killing himself. He's tried suicide. Any targeted individual in the world will let you know that they're hearing these voices and they're being told to kill themselves nonstop. Streams of kill people, kill yourself. Because they want these situations to happen. The feds, they want this. Out of chaos comes order. It's on your dollar bill, ladies and gentlemen. So, with that said, you know, the ignorant parent at the end says, you know, he was allowed to buy a gun. Well, let's first go through what he said, because he was on track before he derailed. The school knew he had problems. The mental health system knew he had problems. Law enforcement knew that he had problems, but was allowed to go through everything without control, without any kind of hands on him that we could see. I can tell you through my own personal experience, once again, I'm going to interject that. I have had talks with lawyers, institutions, everything in my fight to get this sort of stuff exposed, just for my own human rights, my everyday rights that are being violated. I had countless talks with different organizations, legal, private, NGOs. And a lot of these people tell me over the phone, look, I'm going to level with you. I got a call from upstairs and we were told not to help you. A majority of my calls go this way. So, for the situation for this false flag shooter, because that's what he has become now, someone who has been pushed to do this for a political agenda, was denied help by the system to push the gun control agenda, ladies and gentlemen. This guy was the perfect patsy for this agenda. This is the CIA Manchurian candidate wet dream. Okay? They have perfected this. They can churn out these false flag shooters whenever they want. They have a formula now. And so the issue here is not that he was allowed to buy a gun. The real issue here is that he wasn't counseled. There was no prevention. He wasn't counseled. There was nothing to rehabilitate him to be a normal, productive member of society so that he didn't have to lose any of his rights, like buying a gun. Okay, so let's go into Santiago here.
Esteban Santiago, the man responsible for the fatal shootings at Fort Lauderdale's airport, has had a history of mental difficulties, which many people think would explain his actions. But experts say it's not that simple. According to Edward Mulday, a psychologist at the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine, it's actually unusual for mental health problems to drive violence based on symptoms alone. There has been no public explanation of Santiago's motives, and terrorism has not been discounted as a possibility. Mental illness may not have had anything to do with the incident, as it is unclear if Santiago had been diagnosed with mental illness or whether he was undergoing treatment if so.
CBS News correspondent David Begnaud is at the Fort Lauderdale airport. David, why was his gun returned right after he was admitted for mental health issues? And how likely is this the same weapon used in the Fort Lauderdale shooting?
Well, Elaine, they had no reason to keep it. I mean, the federal authorities said yesterday at the press conference, we can't just keep a gun from a man who has been released from the mental facility. So they did the checks that they thought were right at the time. He had every legal right to have the weapon. And so the FBI was saying we had no choice but to give it back to him. As whether it was the weapon used here at the Fort Lauderdale airport, the FBI said, quote, there is suspicion that that is the case. We don't know if they mean they suspect it or other people suspect it, but they acknowledge there is suspicion, but there is no confirmation that it was in fact the weapon used here.
Well, David, as you know, police have detailed a criminal history of violence with Santiago. What do we know?
Well, he had a tumultuous year in 2016. Let's put it that way. Starting in January, he was arrested for criminal mischief. Then in March, he was accused of trying to strangle someone, but there was no probable cause to make an arrest. And then in November, Elaine, he went into that federal facility in Anchorage, which, by the way, is very routine. A lot of people will go to an FBI office with a tip or information. He walked in saying people were trying to control his mind. The FBI said he was having terroristic thoughts. But what we found interesting is that he shows up and leaves his newborn baby in the vehicle. He also left his weapon in the vehicle, took the loaded magazine with him into the office. But at the time he went to the FBI, they said he didn't threaten to harm anyone, not the child, not anyone else. So they thought, you know what, let's just get this guy some help. And so that's why they forced him to go for a mental evaluation.
Well, David, in Puerto Rico, the accused brother is speaking out and blaming the authorities, specifically the FBI, for not helping Santiago when he came to them for help. How is the mother reacting to this?
Very emotional, Elaine. Through tears yesterday, speaking in Spanish to journalists in Puerto Rico. She didn't quite blame the U.S. government for not giving her son enough treatment, but she said that he was, as another family member said, essentially out of his mind. He was having issues that the family knew about. The mother and other family members have indicated that there were periods where they never heard from Santiago. So there would be a phone call at one point during the year of 2016 that you wouldn't hear from him for a month or two. It is worth noting that in the federal document, Santiago allegedly confessed to planning the attack. As of tonight, he is in federal custody at the jail here in Broward County. He is charged with one count of murder. There will be more counts, but that one count allows the authorities to keep him in jail, and he is expected to appear before a federal magistrate tomorrow.
But David, any word on a motive here?
No. And look, we have asked for that. And the FBI is not giving us a motive, but it's worth pointing out, I don't want to overstate this, but the FBI has said twice at every press conference, we have not ruled out terrorism. That is not to say there will be any kind of terroristic involvement. But we just need to tell you that at every press conference, the feds usually start. George Pirro, the special agent in charge here in Miami, has started every briefing. There have only been two that I have been at, where he has said we have not ruled out terrorism. Other than that, there is no motive that has been given at this point, Elaine, other than to say they believe Santiago came here to Fort Lauderdale for nothing else than to commit the mass shooting. He only had a one-way flight.
Let me ask you, David, what charges does Santiago face, and when will he go before a judge?
Well, the judge will be tomorrow morning, and murder is the only charge right now. One count of murder, but you can bet more will follow.
All right. David Begnaud in Fort Lauderdale, Florida for us. David, thank you.
You bet.
Officials say Esteban Santiago is complaining that he was hearing voices. They say a few months ago he walked into the FBI's office in Anchorage, complaining that the CIA was forcing him to join ISIS. Officials say local police were called and he went voluntarily to a mental health facility.
He himself went after them to ask for help, and they did nothing. They had him hospitalized for 4 days, and then they let him go. How are you going to let someone leave a psychological center after 4 days when he is saying that he's hearing voices, that the CIA is telling him to join?
We know now, though, is that he has a history of some mental health issues. And so some are questioning why it is that he had access to a gun, the same gun that he used to kill these innocent people at the baggage claim area. Now, he was being treated in Alaska after complaining of hearing voices and had recently claimed to the FBI that the CIA was forcing him to watch ISIS videos. And that's according to what federal officials have said. His aunt and uncle in New Jersey said,
there have been recent advances in acoustic technology which can transmit sound great distances with a very narrow target range. The long-range acoustic device is one such technology and is currently employed by both military and commercial sea vessels to deter potential attackers. In San Diego, California, Woody Norris, developer of the LRAD, describes another of his acoustic technologies known as hypersonic sound.
It's kind of like radio stations, except in this case, you don't need a receiver. To hear a radio station, I gotta have a receiver. With this, the mixing actually happens in the air, and you hear it without any other device. So if I aim it at you, and it happens to hit both of your ears, and I'm reluctant to say this, it'll be as though the sound is inside your head. This time I'll come all the way around in case you're getting a lot of echo from the room. Much of it is people pleading for help because they've been hearing voices in their head for years. And now this technology explains it.
Okay, so here we have Santiago, who reached out for treatment. You know, mainstream media want to mark him as a terrorist. You know, even terrorists don't go to the FBI asking for help, which he was denied. Okay. He was telling the FBI that the CIA was trying to tell him to join ISIS through this voice to skull technology. Now, I'm going to tell you right now that the FBI will never step in and stop a CIA mark. They just won't overstep that that boundary, that line. They will not intervene with any CIA operations. Okay? So the FBI returned his gun to him. Everyone is upset about that. Again, gun control agenda, ladies and gentlemen. You know, I don't know how many people are suspected of terrorism that get disappeared, you know, Guantanamo Bay, or detained somewhere by the FBI for 6 months at a time. He was let go after 4 days. I guess after his identity in the operation was confirmed. They gave him his weapon back. And so, Santiago's ex-military, just like me. Which is why this hits home with me, because this is going to incriminate all the veterans that come back from the war in the Middle East. We're automatically going to be incriminated. Okay? Everyone that comes back as a veteran, that's why veterans are treated so badly. Veterans are treated like crap. Because they know what's going on in the Middle East. Then they see what's going on in the US. Most of them start connecting the dots. Which is why United States veterans of the military service cannot get the care that they need, the respect, or any of that. It's not going to happen. So they like to turn all these ex-military guys into terrorists. This scares the crap out of armed servicemen, and they stay in the Army or Navy, Marines, etc. So they can get their retirement and be old men and not have to worry about any of this stuff. That's how they are compartmentalizing society. This is social engineering, ladies and gentlemen. So let's go into the next clip, shall we?
Anders Breivik. On the 22nd of July 2011, Anders Breivik posted on various social media sites a manifesto titled 2083, A European Declaration of Independence. It described in detail his militant ideology, and inserted between the text was a link to a YouTube video in which he gave a 12-minute presentation called Knights Templar 2083 that outlined the manifesto. In the video, Breivik can be seen wearing a wetsuit and holding an automatic weapon. Just hours later, at around 15:26, Breivik detonated a fertilizer bomb outside a tower block in Oslo, where the office of the Prime Minister was located. The blast killed 8 people. Breivik then travelled to the Utøya Island, the site of a camp for the Workers' Youth League. At the ferry terminal, he posed as a police officer and was allowed to board a ferry to the island. When he arrived, he went on a murderous rampage and fired intermittently for more than an hour, killing 69 people and wounding 33 others. His youngest victim was just 14 years old. By the end of the day, 77 people had been killed in the deadliest attack in Norway since World War II. Eventually, the Public Force Counter-Terrorism Unit arrived on the island and confronted Breivik, and he surrendered without resistance. After the intense questioning, Breivik made a full confession and revealed the purpose of the attack was to save Norway and Western Europe from a Muslim takeover, and that the Labour Party had to pay the price for letting down Norway and the Norwegian people. In August 2012, he was convicted of mass murder, causing a fatal explosion and terrorism. Psychiatric reports initially diagnosed Breivik as having paranoid schizophrenia. However, a second evaluation, published a week before his trial, concluded he was not psychotic at the time of the massacre. On the 24th of August 2012, Breivik was found to be sane and guilty of murdering 77 people. He was sentenced to 21 years in prison, which doesn't seem long for the atrocities he committed. However, this is the maximum penalty in Norway, and he will not be released for as long as he is deemed a danger to society.
Now, I'm going to tell you the importance with this Oslo massacre. This Norwegian who killed 71 people. The psyop here is that even though he was a target individual, he probably pumped with some sort of patriotism, because these people have actually seen how, okay, these people end up hating the government for the ones that become aware, and they hate society, and da-da-da-da. Let's pump with some sort of patriotism, and that's what happened. This is the slave, soldier, super soldier program that exists today now. Although he was mentally disturbed, not that it was natural, what you're seeing in a lot of these cases is that these people are being deemed too crazy, too nuts to stand trial. So after some time goes by, then they're deemed sane to stand trial. That's the cover-up right there within itself. Okay, so they gave him a reduced sentence of 21 years if he pleaded to be sane and competent to stand trial. That's why his time was reduced so much. And I know Norway has a different justice system, a different prison sentencing scenarios. But I believe if this was a genuine crime, not politically driven, he would have gotten a much heavier sentencing, despite it being Norway. But the trade-off there, you people got to understand the psychological operations here. Even though he was mentally disturbed, again, whether it's natural or not, doesn't matter. He made a plea bargain. If he were to say that he was sane, he would only get so little bit of time. And Europe is already pussified. What you can hardly the talks of buying a gun. I mean, you gotta do a lot of jumping and a lot of dancing to be able to get a gun in Europe. There's not a lot going on here in Europe, and that's how they want it to make it seem like, oh well, we don't need guns over here in Europe because we're so much more civilized and da 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 da, which is garbage. because the Muslims in Europe, they're trying to demonize. And they got the gun thing down here, so it's become acid attacks. Woo! People, if you're going to kill somebody, you're going to kill somebody. If you're going to hurt somebody, you're going to hurt somebody. Okay? Guns don't kill people, people kill people. Okay? It's a matter of what can the government protect themselves against when it's time to roll out that Nazi Fourth Reich, Fifth Reich. I lost track of what Reich we're on now. Covert Reich. It's based on what the governments can protect themselves against. Riot police can wear armor. They have their own set of weapons, guns, They're not worried about acid attacks, but they want to demonize people in the name of false terrorism. And that's what's going on. So let's go on to the next clip.
Sister says alleged Walmart shooter has heard voices since LSD trip in 1988. Denver, the stepsister of a man charged with fatally shooting 3 people at a Colorado Walmart said he has been tormented by voices in his head since taking LSD nearly 30 years ago, an event she said radically changed his behavior and personality. When he came home, he was terrified. He had voices in his head, demons, Michelle Willoughby told the Denver Post in an interview posted online Monday. Prosecutors filed multiple counts of first-degree murder and attempted murder charges Monday against Scott Ostrom, 47, Willoughby's stepbrother. Ostrom is accused of walking into a Walmart in the Denver suburb of Thornton on Wednesday and fatally shooting a woman and 2 men. Prosecutors still have not offered any clues into possible reasons for the attack. Can't talk about a motive yet, thanks, Adams County District Attorney Dave Young said Monday. Willoughby, who lives in Cocoa Beach, Florida, said she does not know what might have triggered the shooting because she has not been able to speak with Ostrom. But she said he had been outgoing, sociable and athletic before taking LSD at a party in 1988, and afterward he became a recluse haunted by voices saying the devil was after him. The family contacted a hospital, and Ostrom underwent a drug intervention but did not get psychological treatment, she said. Ostrom was frequently counseled by a Catholic priest who placed a crucifix on his forehead, commanded demons to leave his body and asked God to silence the voices, Willoughby said. She said the priest has since died and she does not recall his name. The National Institute on Drug Abuse says the long-term effects of LSD and other hallucinogenic drugs can include mood disturbances, paranoia, disorganized thinking and hallucinations. But such effects are rare, the institute said on its website, and they are more likely to occur in people with a history of psychological problems. Charles Grob, a psychiatry professor at UCLA, said it is unlikely that LSD would be the cause of a decades-long psychosis. It was more likely that Ostrom had some severe disturbance to begin with, he said. I don't think LSD is the right culprit, Grob said. Willoughby said she is bothered by the way Ostrom has been characterized on social media. My brother is not this monster, she said. He is not cold-blooded. He hears these voices. Honestly, in my heart, I believe there is only so much a person can take.
Okay, so here we have the Walmart shooter. Okay? The Walmart killer. LSD. Oh, boy, isn't that an excuse. As you heard there by the professionals, they're saying LSD is not enough to do this. Now, we all know the CIA experimented with mind control with LSD, and this guy was around that time. This is one of the victims of the CIA resurfacing right now. The brain has been reformatted by this LSD drug that allowed the Manchurian sort of scenario to pop up, to resurface. The aspect of, again, the vaccines and all the autistic children being born, this is the control system in which they're gonna harass more and more people, especially with a different type of brain chemistry, to do what it is they want to do. And the more and more of these people they have, depending on the political landscape, they're going to push more and more of these false flag shooters out. False flag killers out. They're going to push more and more for the sake of national security. Again, out of chaos comes order. There was never any real problem to begin with, but in order for these people to have more totalitarian control, they have to create a problem so they can give a solution. And that means stripping away your rights, stripping away your guns, etc. Now, I'm very upset about this next clip that's coming up, and I'm going to tell you why after you see it.
Update on a double murder in Carrollwood that shook that neighborhood. 21-year-old Nicole Notchman brought back to Hillsborough County just hours ago to face double homicide charges. The FSU student is accused of gunning down her mom and stepfather last Thursday. Our Jacqueline Iglesias is live at the Hillsborough County Jail with some shocking new information in this case. Jacqueline?
Well, Wendy, just as Nicole Notchman was being driven into the Sally Port here at the Orient Road Jail that you see behind me, we got our hands on her very explosive arrest report.
Nicole, what happened?
21-year-old Nicole Notchman is not talking about the murders of her mother, Marion Denis, or her stepfather, Robert Denis, both gunned down last Thursday night. But this arrest affidavit speaking volumes tonight. According to deputies, the FSU student began hearing voices on campus telling her to kill her parents.
The reason why this particular story upsets me, this happened around the same time that I had my radio show back in California. I contacted, well, at least I tried. I called this little lady's lawyer. I called their law office to alert them that psychotronic weapons were being used on this particular individual, this 21-year-old at the time. I got the receptionist twice when I called, told to call back. I called 2 more times, and every time I called, I asked, so who is this? I want to speak to the lawyer of this person in question that's in custody. This is a special investigator. Well, okay there, Mr. Special Investigator. I've never heard of a special investigator answering a lawyer's phone calls. You want to know what the special investigator told me? They told me, they said to me, what is your interest in this case? This is a very pressing issue. We don't just take any phone calls from anyone. I said, well, I'm V, host of the Red Pill Hardcore radio show, and I want to inform you about the psychotronic weaponry going on, the attacking of individuals through covert technology that are being victims in a social engineering crime. Okay, we'll get back to you. Hung up. They never got back to me. Ended up calling again. And again, my call was intercepted by the special investigator who didn't identify themselves in any way. Didn't tell me what kind of a special investigator they were, although I can assume that they were feds. I said, this person was harassed by psychotronic weaponry. You want to know what this person told me? Yes, we know all about it. Thank you for calling. Hung up on me. I did everything I could to help this individual. I'm very upset. I'm very upset that the government is so corrupt I mean, I understand CIA, NSA operations going on to create excuses to put this totalitarian control on the country and the rest of the world, like the Nazi Reich that it is. I understand that, but I'm very upset about how many people are actually corrupted by this. They immediately had their handlers on the situation. Immediately. It was sickening. So that's all I have as far as clips for the live targeted individuals. I want to end this half of the movie with a clip of someone knowing something about psychology and the way the mind works, way more than any Dr. Phil or whatever. So
that persons diagnosed with mental illness are actually far more likely to be the victims of violence, not the perpetrators of violence. And that they're far more likely, if they're involved in a violent act, to be shot by someone else rather than to be the shooters. And so we dealt with the complicated reasons of why was it? Why was it that the reality of what's happening in the United States is turned on its head in the aftermath of these, again, horrific mass shootings? We average about 32,000 shootings a year in this country on average over the last 15, 20 years. And this is everything from homicides to suicides to assaults. And what we found was that there were a number of factors that are far more likely to be associated with shootings than our mental illness. Substance use at the time of an emotionally charged conflict is very indicative. The presence of a firearm, of course, in cases of suicide, increases the risk of a fatal suicide. A past history of violence is a much greater indicator than is mental illness for violence. And the one we found the most interesting was actually knowing someone is a risk factor, in that about 85% of shootings in this country happen within social networks. So you're far more likely to be shot by your neighbor or your cousin or your disgruntled brother-in-law or something like that than you are by some crazed stranger. I'm not saying in any way that people shouldn't have guns. I think that there's a constitutional right to bear arms. But I would say that the rhetoric whereby people are accumulating guns in the present day has a lot to do with this fear of the unknown stranger. Somebody could come attack us, we need to protect ourselves. And I think that the gun discourse perpetuates some crazy person is going to come shoot you. But if you actually look at the research, it's not the crazy person necessarily that you have to fear. You're far more likely to be shot by somebody you know. We should set our gun policies based on the everyday shootings, not on the sensational shootings, because there, I believe, we'll get far more traction in preventing gun crime. The mentally ill across the board are about 60 to 120% more likely than the average person to be the victims of violent crime, not the perpetrators of violent crime. And of course that makes sense when you think that people with mental illness, especially severe mental illness, often they're homeless or they're talking to themselves or they appear odd in a certain kind of way. They become targets. Our argument in the paper in part is that we need to pay much more attention to mental health systems. How do people get care? Do they have health insurance? Is there follow-up? Is there medication available to them? Other issues like that. So in a way, it was a failure of the system often that just became represented as a failure.
So, yes, the government has had endless amounts of, I would say, technological, psychological operations, which all revolve around mind control. So we have seen all those targeted individuals who were taken alive. Let's see all the ones that were not taken alive.
Hey guys, Melissa here, and it's happening again. And no, I'm not talking about Obama signing yet another executive order pretty much right now as I'm recording this. I'm actually talking about the fact that yet another shooting has happened, a high-profile shooting, where the person felt they were being mind-controlled by the government. How many times is this going to have to happen before people start to put these pieces together and realize this is a theme here? There's a pattern here that this keeps happening. It's not once or twice, it's a whole bunch of times. Okay? This guy was an attorney, he was an alumni of Florida State University, and he walked in there last night and wounded 3 people with a gun and then was killed by police. I've been in contact with several people off of Facebook who have watched local news reports in Florida, and they're interviewing his girlfriend, and his girlfriend is talking about how all of a sudden he came down with a mental illness just out of nowhere that he'd never had before. And up until then, he was a totally positive, happy-go-lucky, nice guy. Everyone liked him. Mr. Sensitive, great guy. And all of a sudden, he just came down with a mental illness. Just bam, horrible mental illness, thinks the government's stalking him. FSU's shooter, Myron May, feared the government was targeting him. And if you come down and read it, it says, police say the 31-year-old was in a state of crisis and believed he was being targeted by the government. His Facebook page showed he was interested in targeted individuals who believe they're victims of mind control and covert harassment they call gang stalking. Has anyone here ever been encouraged by your handler to kill with a promise of freedom? May wrote on a November 14th Facebook page for a group called Targeted Individuals International.
Okay, so that information was very useful. I'm glad there are other people that are looking at this critically that are not targeted individuals. But we need a better understanding of what happened, as Myron May actually made some YouTube videos right before he did what he felt he had to do. Let's go into that.
It's with a heavy heart that I am in front of you now to make this video, kind of my last words. It's really unfortunate that I have to make this video. You see, I am a victim of covert harassment and electronic harassment and gang stalking. I'm what's called a targeted individual. There are thousands of targeted individuals in the United States of America, and we unfortunately are subjected to some pretty heinous treatment, which I'll detail in this video. You can find out more about what a targeted individual is simply by Googling or YouTubing the words targeted individual. It's a very comprehensive program, and sadly it's a government program. Its roots are in programs known as MK Ultra and COINTELPRO, which should have been eliminated, but unfortunately they are still around. They're not only still around, but they're actually far more comprehensive and more detailed than they were even when those programs were popular. But like I said, the goal is literally to isolate the person, make them destitute and financially unstable to the point where they can't take care of themselves. Many targeted individuals live in homeless shelters and on the street. And they employ various tactics to accomplish their goal of destroying targeted individuals. The most common experience that you'll hear is, and why the term gang stalking comes about, is because they'll have people follow you around. Whenever you go into public places, like if you're driving on the street, people in cars will follow you around, and they make themselves very known that they're there and they are present and they are looking at you. If you go any public place, like going shopping or anything like that, they'll follow you around the stores. And as sick as this may sound, I've even had stalkers follow me into church. It's literally to keep the targeted individual agitated, stressed out, and never really have their mind at ease, to make them paranoid. They employ isolation tactics. They basically try to convince your family, your friends, your neighbors, your coworkers that they should be keeping an eye on you for whatever reason. They do this. Some of them they pay off to keep an eye on you, to look at you in strange ways. They do this through blackmail. They'll blackmail individuals into stalking you and harassing you, looking at you. And they do this to people who actually are real criminals. Targeted individuals are typically just regular Joes, everyday ordinary innocent people, and somehow we've ended up on this ungodly evil list of people who have their lives literally destroyed on a day-to-day basis. Another way that they coerce everyday citizens into participating in harassing targeted individuals is that they'll tell them lies like you're under investigation for something, or you've committed a crime, or they should keep an eye on you because you're crazy. And as you can see right now, I am totally not crazy. I'm completely sane, but they've employed these tactics against me as well to try to make me appear to be a crazy person. There's a saying that people do anything for money, and basically if they're doing it not only for money but also based on a lie, it's weird because they get this sort of altruistic thing because they think they're helping to prevent crime or something like that, so they have that altruistic feeling, plus they get money for it. But what they don't realize is that many of those people are just participating in an evil, ungodly program that's designed to debilitate people like me, everyday ordinary citizens. The target individual starts to withdraw and isolates himself, and he's alone. But also, one thing that they did with me is try to convince me that my neighbors were the ones who were actually harassing me. When I would be in my apartment at night, and they were very successful at this for about 2 months. 2 months before I realized that I was actually a targeted individual, or what a targeted individual even was. I would hear voices in my apartment explaining what it was that I was doing. If I went to the kitchen, they'd say stuff, oh, he's headed to the kitchen now. Or if I went to the bathroom, they're like, oh, he's headed to the bathroom. And this sounds bad, but one particular time I didn't wash my hands, they're like, look at him, he doesn't even wash his hands when I was in the bathroom after I used the bathroom. This is the type of stuff that they do. And because I'm hearing these voices, I'm thinking, oh my God, somebody is listening to me. And naturally, you think that it's the person closest to you. So I thought it was my neighbors above me, that somehow they had installed a video camera in my apartment. And I realized that later that wasn't the case, but I'll explain in the video later exactly what that is that gave me that false belief. The next method they use that I want to talk about is called brighting. Brighting can be very irritating, and it sounds just like what it is. When you're driving on the road, for example, a person may flash their bright lights in your face. Like when you're oncoming traffic, people will have their bright lights on you. Now, it's not unusual, obviously, to experience somebody with their bright lights on you. I mean, it's not unusual at all. People often forget, that their brights are on when they're riding at night. And then, you just give them that quick flash, and they'll flick it back to the regular dimmer lights. But with brighting, if you give them that quick flash, they don't actually click it back to the regular dimmer lights. They'll keep on the bright lights. And this is not something, it's not like a one-time occurrence. This, you expect to have something like that on a long trip happen once or twice just because that's what happens. It's happenstance. But this will happen like 10 times in one short trip. Not only with oncoming traffic, but people will come up behind you, and basically when they're tailgating you and they have their bright lights on, individuals will come up really quickly and pass you, and then as they're passing you, they'll flick their bright lights on so they're shining your side mirrors and stuff like that. That's brighting. Brighting takes another form as well. When you're in your home, individuals will shine bright lights into the windows of your home. For example, they might pull up in your driveway and shine very bright lights into the door or windows of your home. It's not unusual for that type of thing to happen. People do get lost and have to turn around, but this will happen several times in one night. And basically that's just their way of letting you know that they are present and that it's a way of harassment, that, your mind can never really be at ease. Your mind you'll always be paranoid because there's always somebody there to interact with you. Some of the other noise campaign experiences I had, when I was in Las Cruces, my neighbors were constantly making noise. I lived in this apartment complex, Quail Ridge Apartments, for a year and a half, and I never had any issues with noise. But in the last few months that I was there, it was constantly noise around me. My neighbors were constantly playing loud music, constantly talking loud and screaming and stuff like that. And one particular night, the neighbor above me was playing music really, really loud. So I didn't want to be that neighbor that complains on everyone. So what I did was I just put some earplugs in my ear and tried to nestle in and go to sleep. Shortly after I put these earplugs in my ear, my bed actually is on the wall adjoining one of my neighbors, the neighbor that was behind me. And the headboard is literally on that adjoining wall. As soon as I put the earplugs in, I started hearing these extremely loud sex sounds. Now, mind you, I've lived here a year and a half. I've slept in my apartment a year and a half, and I've never heard any noises come out of this apartment, sex or otherwise. But on this particular night, well, I'd heard for those few months, I heard music and stuff like that, and loud talking and screaming. But on this particular night, as soon as I put the earplugs in, these loud sex sounds just started coming out of nowhere. So that kind of let me know, okay, this is part of this stupid harassment that I'm experiencing. The next harassment technique I want to talk about is ghosting. And this isn't actually one that I experienced, but other targeted individuals, when you watch their videos, they'll talk about it, and you'll get to hear their stories. But basically, this is where they will rearrange a targeted individual's personal belongings. For example, might break into their house, which in and of itself is wrong. They'll break into their house, rearrange their furniture, or rearrange things on their desk or in their bedroom. They'll actually rearrange lawn ornaments and stuff like that are in the yard. So when the targeted individual returns back to their home, they see that things are sort of out of place. And that obviously arouses fear and paranoia and apprehension and stuff like that to further exacerbate this evil, ungodly program that they participate in to try to harass targeted individuals. The next technique I want to talk about is called mimicry. This involves when a targeted individual encounters one of their stalkers, the stalker will actually do everything literally do everything, the same movements, same motions that the targeted individual does. So it's very irritating, and these particular stalkers make their presence very known. I had this experience once when I was in Weewa at the Easy Serve gas station. I pulled into the gas station to pump some gas, and when I pulled in, this guy comes from behind the pump next to me, and he has on these dark sunglasses, really dark sunglasses, which is my particular stimuli that they've used in my stalking experience. But these really dark sunglasses, he looks at me, and then he starts waving his hands and moving his head to try to basically get my attention. Hey, I'm here. And I ignored him at first, and then I went to go start washing my window. So I'm washing the front window. As I start washing my front window, he starts washing his front window, and he's looking at me while he's washing his front window with these dark shades on. So then I move to the side window, and he moves to the side window, and he's looking at me with these dark shades on and washing his window. And it was really creepy. Everything I did, he did. But, I ignored it. That's just one of the things that targeted individuals experience, is this kind of harassment to try to make you frustrated or angry or paranoid or nervous, or, start to kind of question, what in the world is going on with me. But I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that there's nothing going on with me. I mean, God has not given me a spirit of fear, but one of power, one of love, and one of a sound mind. And I thank him for having a sound mind. I know that nothing is going on with me, and that it was absolutely just part of this evil, ungodly program. The next thing I want to talk about, technique I want to talk about, is called sensitization. And this one is pretty critical for the overall targeted individuals harassment program. This refers to basically, they want the targeted individual to associate a particular stimuli with their harassment. For example, whenever you're out in the public as a targeted individual, if you encounter people wearing blue baseball caps, you start to associate blue baseball caps with you being harassed. So that way, going forward, anytime you see a person in a blue baseball cap, you'll instantly think, is this person here to harass me? In my particular situation, they used dark sunglasses as my stimuli. And it worked very, very well at first. I got to the point where every time I saw someone in dark sunglasses, I would kind of freak out. I would be looking at them extra because I thought that person was there to harass me. This is before I knew I was a targeted individual. After I knew I was a targeted individual and realized that this was just part of the game, perception is reality, I was able to calm myself down. I still was paranoid. I see people in dark sunglasses. Even now, I see people in dark sunglasses and they get extra attention from me because that's part of the game. But then I just remind myself, look, I'm a targeted individual. This is part of the game. This is perception. This perception is reality. And I'm able to kind of calm those fears. The next technique I want to talk about is called mobbing. And this particular technique happens most often when a target starts to realize that maybe there's something more going on to their experiences that meets the eye, or maybe the target is already in kind of a flustered or frustrated state. Then you experience what's called mobbing, and that's when you get harassed by several stalkers at one time. And this is basically designed as a scare tactic to really drive the target into paranoia. This happened to me on several occasions because I have a pretty low anger threshold. This happened to me on so many occasions. If I'd be driving along the street, 5-10 cars will pass by all at the same time. Everybody has on dark shades, and they're not watching the road. They're watching me. Like, they're not looking at the road like a normal driver would do. As they pass by, they're looking directly at me. So it's very creepy. But that's what mobbing is. It also happened to me a few times in the grocery store where people would come with dark shades on, and sometimes not with dark shades on. They just come very much into my personal space in a way that's unnatural, not the way a normal person would shop or a normal person would behave even outside the grocery store. And they'd be looking directly at me to make sure, their presence is felt, their presence is known. The next gang stalking technique I want to talk about is called hacking. Hacking is just like what it sounds. Basically, they will download viruses and malware onto the targeted individual's computers and other electronic devices like their cell phone and stuff like that to either try to damage files, or more importantly, what I think it is to try to gain remote access to their electronic devices so that they can modify things, delete things, and manipulate the targeted individual's files and data. Talk about some of my experiences with hacking. When I first realized that there was maybe more going on than meets the eye in my particular scenario, and I started to come to the realization that I was a targeted individual, viruses and malware were downloaded onto my Toshiba laptop. I would literally be working on my computer on something, and then all of a sudden my mouse would start moving and be clicking on things totally out of my control. Like, I'm not touching the mouse or anything, and the mouse is just kind of wiggling around and clicking on things and opening things and closing things and all sorts of. It was a very weird experience, and of course, again, is designed to cause fear and apprehension and paranoia. One night in particular, I was trying to buy a book by Renee Pittman Mitchell, who is a targeted individual who has written several books on her experience as a targeted individual, advice books and stuff like that, how to cope with this experience. And I was trying to purchase this book from Amazon, and my phone, the browser on my phone kept closing on its own. And mind you, I've had this phone now. I don't have that phone anymore, but at the time I had that phone for about just shy of 2 years, and I'd never experienced anything like that at all when I was on my browser. But I'd be on my phone and trying to buy this book, and all of a sudden the browser just closes, just shuts down. Another experience I had with hacking, I recently moved from Las Cruces, New Mexico to go back home, hoping that all of this would end when I went back home. So I moved to Weehawken, Florida. It's a small town, about 1,700 people. And I might be being generous saying 1,700 people. But I pretty much figured in this small town, there's no way they can stalk me. There's no way they can bother me. I'm fine. One of the ways that they did, I got a job working at the Taunton Family Children's Home, doing some small legal work and stuff like that for them. And one of the projects I had, there was a mom who had her daughter stolen away from her by the child's biological father, who had not been in her life for a very long time. And so I was working on some family law documents to try to get her daughter returned to her. And I'm not a family lawyer, and this was based on Tennessee law, and I'm not licensed to practice in Tennessee. So I spent about a day working on this particular document. And when I finished the document, they basically shut down the computer. The mouse starts moving, and closing out things and shut down the computer. So when I turn the computer back on, thank God, the auto recovery saved my document. And I didn't lose all the file and all the data I had been working on because I was working under a time deadline. And that just goes to show how heartless and evil that this program really is. I mean, I'm trying to help a mom get her child back, and you're taking over my computer to try to kill the document. I mean, that's the kind of evil ungodliness we're dealing with this particular program, in my experience.
Yeah, so Myron May, the attorney, very smart, a very peaceful, timid looking guy. I mean, I know how many people say that I just sheer intimidation until I speak and smile. You know, I come off as that guy, you know, don't want to mess with until you actually get to hear me speak. But this man was very timid. Very nerdy, timid sort of guy. He didn't have that aura, that fierceness an alpha male like myself would have. You know, an attorney, very smart guy. Yet we share all the same experiences. The experiences he has talked about, I had, and much worse. Much worse. I know he was holding back a little bit for this video that he did. And go online, go onto YouTube and watch the full videos. He did like a two-parter, I think about 2 hours of footage. But I got the essentials there in that 8-minute clip to sort of narrow down and get the grasp of what was going on.
Newport police tell us they came here to the Marriott a month ago for a harassment call. According to the police report, the man we now know as the Navy Yard shooter said people were following him. He was hearing voices and they were putting vibrations in his body to keep him awake. Newport police say they responded to the Marriott Hotel early in the morning on August 7th. Aaron Alexis told police he was a naval contractor who traveled often. Alexis told the officer he had a verbal fight with someone at the airport in Virginia as he was getting on a flight to Rhode Island. And that person sent 3 people to follow him and keep him awake by talking to him and sending vibrations into his body. Alexis left a Middletown hotel, went to a Navy base hotel, but still heard the voices. He escaped to a 3rd hotel, the Marriott, but the voices continued. Alexis told the officer the 3 individuals were speaking to him through the floor and using some sort of microwave machine to send vibrations through the ceiling, penetrating his body so he cannot fall asleep. A Newport police sergeant contacted Naval Station Police, which said it would follow up and determine if Alexis was a naval base contractor. Today, Alexis's employer, The Experts, confirms the 34-year-old information technology employee worked for them for 6 months over the last year, and that his most recent background check and security clearance in June revealed no issues other than 1 minor traffic violation. And there have been numerous reports today that Alexis sought mental health counseling. We were unable to confirm with the VA that he was indeed treated or where that treatment may have taken place.
Yes, so there we have Aaron Alexis, the Navy Yard shooter. Now, he was having vibrations put through his body. This was done for sleep deprivation. Actually, when it comes to sleep deprivation, a person can develop a natural psychosis. You know, a person's been awake for, 4 days, 5 days, a week. They can get a little strange. Okay? This is not unheard of. But to be telling people that he's having vibrations sent through his body, well, we all know the government has Tesla technology that they stole earlier last century. So this is all very, these are telltale signs that I'm going to go through. But the thing is, with people with a real psychosis, they typically don't run from place to place trying to find a place to sleep. A person with a real psychosis clearly define what place is safe, what place is not. And they will typically go to the place that's safe in their mind and get their sleep. It is very clear that Aaron Alexis was being harassed by frequencies. And with Aaron Alexis also being a Navy contractor, he was well aware of what ELF technology was. Extremely low frequency. That's what ELF technology is. Extremely low frequency bombardment. I've experienced this myself, being woken up many times, feeling like my bed was shaking, like there was an earthquake around myself. I've experienced this personally all the time. Luckily, I didn't go crazy because, well, I'm a natural insomniac. I've always had problems sleeping ever since I was a kid. But again, you see how in all these news broadcasts, they say that he tried to get help from mental health services. He was denied at the VA. There's no records. It's funny how there's no records with these shooters that just disappear. Doesn't say whether he got the help or not. That is a very strange pattern, don't you guys think? So, being a Navy contractor, it's very important, again, that I reiterate that the Navy pioneers this technology. ELF communication from satellite to submarine. ELF goes through all physical matter that we have as a species, as a society. ELF goes right through a wall. There's nowhere you can hide from it. And Dr. Eldon Bird was a Navy contractor, scientist, who actually worked on this. I'll put the link down below. So, let's go into the Virginia Tech shooter.
Just minutes after firing 2 fatal shots at the Virginia Tech dormitory on Monday, Cho Sung-wi returned to his own dorm room and made the final preparations to mail what appears to be a video confession.
When the time came, I did it. I had to.
In a separate written document, he includes 29 photos he apparently took of himself. He looks like a normal, smiling college student in only the first 2. In the rest, he presents the stern face and strikes the pose that was very likely what his victim saw later on Monday. In 11 of the pictures, he aims handguns at the camera, likely the very ones he bought in the past 2 months. In his 1,800-word diatribe, he expresses rage, resentment, and a desire to get even, with exactly whom he never says.
You had 100 billion chances in the ways to have avoided today, but you decided to spill my blood. You forced me into a corner and gave me only one option. The decision was yours. Now you have blood on your hands that will never wash off.
Much of it is incoherent, laced with profanity. He rails against hedonism and Christianity.
You just loved crucifying me. You loved inducing cancer in my head, terrorizing my heart, and ripping my soul all this time.
Though he tried to cover his tracks by filing down the serial numbers on his guns, he obviously wanted the world to know who was responsible for the worst mass shooting in America. He began working on these materials at least 6 days beforehand.
I didn't have to do this. I could have left. I could have fled. But no, I will no longer run. If not for me, for my children, for my brothers and sisters, the chief. I did it for them. This is it. This is where it all ends. End of the road. What a life it was. Some life. Do you think I wanted to do this? Do you think I've ever dreamed of dying like this in a million years? I didn't want to do this. You have vandalized my heart, raped my soul, and torched my conscience. You thought it was one pathetic boy's life you were extinguishing. I did it for them. I did it to make you stop what you did to me, to the future generations of the weak and the defenseless. Like Moses, I split the sea and lead my people, the weak, the defenseless, and the innocent children of all ages. You had 100 billion chances and ways to have avoided today, but you decided to spill my blood. You forced me into a corner and gave me only one option. I didn't have to do this. I could have left. I could have fled. But no, I will no longer run. If not for me, for my children, for my brothers and sisters that you I did it for them. You sadistic snobs, I may be nothing but a piece of You have vandalized my heart, raped my soul, and torched my conscience. You thought it was one pathetic boy's life you were extinguishing. Thanks to you, I died, like Jesus Christ, to inspire generations of the weak and the defenseless people. Do you know what it feels like to be spit on your face and have trash shoved down your throat? Do you know what it feels like to dig your own grave? Do you know what it feels like to have your throat slashed from ear to ear? Do you know what it feels like to be torched alive? Do you know what it feels like to be humiliated and be impaled upon on a cross and left to bleed to death for your amusement? You have never felt a single ounce of pain your whole life. Yet you want to inject as much misery in our lives as you can, just because you can. You had everything you wanted. Your Mercedes wasn't enough, you brats. Your golden necklaces weren't enough, you snobs. Your trust fund wasn't enough. Your vodka and cognac weren't enough. All your debaucheries weren't enough. Those weren't enough to fulfill your hedonistic needs. You had everything.
I am so glad that people are doing their own research, not just listening to what mind control, Operation Mockingbird, CIA, mainstream media tells you. To listen to mainstream media is a cover-up by itself. Of course they control what you hear when you turn on the boob tube, the idiot box. CNN, Fox News, ABC, CSNBC, they're not worth the ground they stand on. So, there are a lot of people out there doing their own independent research and coming up with real answers. So, I want to go into the Virginia Tech shooter. So, here we have the Virginia Tech shooter. And I know exactly where I was when this was going on. I myself was in the VA on the base where I was stationed when I was watching this sitting in the waiting room. It's back in 2007, yeah. So this is very personal for me because he went through what I later on went through 7 years later. I wish I had the forethought at the time to pick up the pieces and see what the hell was going on. But I was in the military, so I didn't make the best choices back then to begin with. But I'm older and wiser now. So, he says he wants to get even. He wants to get even, but it does not state any of these videos, nothing, no material states against who. Perhaps he didn't know exactly who. A lot of target individuals debate on who it is, whether it's Scientology, the government, This corporation, that corporation, a lot of target individuals have different stories because a lot of these people are targeted by people who are connected with the government. You offend somebody that owns this group over here, this tech firm, and you get reported, oh, this person's going against the system, and you become targeted. It's the government, the shadow government, that runs this program. It doesn't matter who reports you. You're going against the system or any of its many arms, you get targeted. So he felt persecuted. Persecuted by whom? Once again, we have no information from the videos at first glance. He said they didn't have to do this. They didn't have to do what? This was a college student, okay? He was forced into a corner. These are all key phrases. Forced into a corner. Killers don't make videos about what they're going to do, typically, unless they state that they hate a certain person or a certain group. They have malice towards a certain group of people, and this is what they're going to do. That's what real killers do. Killers don't make videos confessing what they're going to do and state that they didn't want to do it and say that they wish they had some other recourse. It's not what real killers do. And I want to let you know, from a cultural standpoint, Koreans, very proud people. Very good, proud people. They don't like to discuss the problems that they're having with family and so forth. I myself can validate this point of view because I myself, as a very young teenager, I told my mom, I'm really depressed. Maybe there's something wrong with me. After watching too much TV and then going through this educational system that's telling me everything in the world is wrong with me, I get depressed. Maybe I should be on some psychiatric drugs, Mom. My mother said, no, that's not gonna happen. You don't listen to what those white people are saying. You don't listen to any of that garbage. More people that get on psychiatric drugs kill themselves than they are off of it. I actually learned that my mother was telling me the truth. Very wise decision. And I worked through my depression. I found out who I was and so forth. So I worked through it. I feel as though the system thought, they got screwed over out of, someone that they thought they were going to enslave or turn into a killer. My mother, a very smart woman, worked for a tech firm. 19 and a half years worked for his tech firm, got laid off. I believe this was some sort of punishment for her teaching me right and guiding me in the right direction. And so, family difficulties arose from that point on, but it's not about me. So, there's no way this guy was going to talk about his problems with his family. But he did mention how his heart was vandalized, his soul raped, his consciousness tortured. This sounds like someone who has had someone personally invading his life, his very mind. Any targeted individual in the world can tell you how being targeted feels, especially being hooked up to the NSA remote neural monitoring and synthetic telepathy, voice to skull, the whole thing. It's literally no privacy. Forget about the privacy in your home. There's no privacy in your mind, as someone can invade it with messages. So this is why he felt so humiliated. Humiliation is the process that tips someone overboard. Humiliation, again, from a proud Korean family. Humiliation is very important. And so, on top of that, he was a mute. Virginia Tech shooter was a very quiet guy, a mute. Now, the reason for this, psychologists could not figure out. Somehow, it was because he was hearing voices. Being from a proud Korean family, you don't talk about hearing voices being crazy. That brings shame and dishonor on the family. I mean, killing people is one thing, but to say that they were imperfect themselves, that's another. The problem has to be external, not within. So him being a mute, any TI, I will tell you again, any targeted individual will tell you how hard it is, especially the ones receiving the voices, the V2K. Because you have to not look crazy. You have to try to go through day to day without looking crazy. People that talk to themselves, guess what? They're crazy. We've all seen the homeless man pushing a cart outside in the city, wherever, talking to himself nonstop. He's not talking to himself. He's on a remote neural monitoring synthetic audio harassment program. He's supposed to kill himself. He's no longer needed by society. This person, female, male, what have you, has been screwed out of their job, home, family, and barely hanging on to life. Barely. They're not gonna kill themselves, but they have literally actually been driven crazy to where they can tolerate the voices, and they have actually made that a part of them, which is why they don't kill themselves. But the American government attacking people that they don't like and putting them into these situations. That's why America, actually in this case, not just the government, but America in itself is not doing anything to help homeless people. We as Americans are taught that homeless people are crazy. Well, this is why, ladies and gentlemen. Homelessness has not been a huge problem in the history of mankind, except for this last century and up to the current day. A person can get a job, a person can do this, a person can come up, a person can live out in the wilderness. With the Urban Agenda 21 sort of ordeal, I mean, how many people have been killed being homeless? We have police slaughtering homeless people. It's not being talked about. But okay, anyways, here I go on a rant again. Let's go on to another story. Speaking about history, let's go deeper into the history of this program. I have a target individual that you would have had no idea was a target individual.
It was here in these woods off Florida's I-75 that in the space of 1 year the police found the bodies of 7 men. They were killed with this gun, a high-standard double 9.22. Richard Mallory, Walter Antonio, Dick Humphreys, David Spears, Charles Costadin, Peter Sims, and Troy Burrows.
8 men have been shot to death in cold blood on Central Florida highways, including the busy tourist route of I-75.
On January the 9th, 1991, Eileen Carol Warnos was arrested in Daytona Beach, Florida. She worked as a hitchhiking hooker. This is Lee Warnos as she was first being charged. A prostitute from the age of 14, Lee had a long history of neglect and sexual abuse. Lee was born in 1956 in Troy, Michigan. 3 months later, she was abandoned by her mother. Eileen's father, Leo, who was convicted of kidnapping and sodomizing an 8-year-old boy, he committed suicide in prison. Eileen's grandfather, Lowry, who she called Dad and is rumored to be Eileen's biological father, he abused both Eileen and her mother. Eileen aged 13 when she got pregnant and had a baby boy that was put out for adoption. This is a picture of Chief, the local pedophile. He's thought to be the father of Eileen's child. Chief later committed suicide. After Keith, her brother, died of cancer aged 21, Eileen surprised everyone by marrying this man, Louis Fell, who was 76 years old and president of the Keystone Coal Company. But after only a month, Louis filed for restraining charges after Eileen beat Louis with his own walking stick. In her late 20s, Eileen gave up on men and started dating women. Here's Tyra, who became Eileen's family. They lived together for over 3 years. This was one of the homes they had. Eileen saw herself as a kind of Bonnie and Clyde character on the run with her lover Tyra. People were also concerned that Tyria Moore had not come forward earlier.
And I feel like the other girl could have stopped some of them if she'd have come forward in time. She knew about them, some of them. But she didn't say anything. Maybe save 4 men could have been saved if she had, and she did not.
Lee's life was, this is pretty much, she had run out. As a prostitute, which she was never that very successful with, she never put much effort into it. She was overweight, she was beery, she never dressed as a prostitute, never wore makeup, she wore cutoffs, sneakers, a camo t-shirt and a cap and glasses standing on the side of the road. And her hustle, as you look at her hustle, she wasn't soliciting. She would get in the car, engage the situation, say, these are my kids here, and show the photographs of the children. Well, Lori Grody's children, his aunt's sister's children, and give them some song and dance story. I need some money, and I'll tell you what, I'll do this for you. We could go over here in the woods and do this. It was, she was running out of options.
At 8 o'clock, time ticking away for serial killer Eileen Warnos.
Her date with death set for about 90 minutes from now. 7's Patrick Frazier is live in Rayford as her sentence is about to be carried out. Good morning, Patrick.
Christine, in an hour and a half exactly, Eileen Warnos will be injected with a poison. Within about 2 minutes, she will begin to stop breathing. Now, it's tough to say who will be happier that she is dying, the families of the victims she brutally murdered or Eileen Warnos.
So I was a hitchhiking hooker.
Right.
Running into trouble. I shoot the guy if I ran into trouble. Physical trouble. The cops knew it. When the physical trouble came along, let her clean the streets. Did you know that they were surveilling me before I killed? And then I knew it. And that it was covered up. Did you know there was helicopters dropping down from the sky? Deputy sheriff with decoys picking me up 4 or 5 months before my arrest. It was covered up. And let me kill the rest of those guys to turn me into a serial killer. I know they did, because I was no professional serial killer or anything, murderer or whatever you want to call it, I wasn't professional at what I was doing.
Eileen,
did some sloppy work, And I left.
How have you prepared yourself for tomorrow morning?
I'm all right with it, but like I said, remember and let them know that I know that the cops knew who I was. After Richard Mallory died, I left prints everywhere, and they covered it up. Hey, I was tortured at BCI. They had the intercom on in the room, and they kept lying that it wasn't on, and they were using sonic pressure on my head since 1997. They're trying to make it look like I was crazy at all times, rig up the room with torture. If I said anything about I think their whole plan was trying to make it look like I was totally crazy, and so nobody would believe anything I had to say about anything. And every time I was trying to write something, I think they had some kind of eye in the cell, I'm not sure, but every time I started writing something, it went up higher. So I'm thinking that probably had the TV rigged. The TV or the mirror, something was rigged. They got a huge satellite on the compound. After they put the huge satellite on the compound, it could have been either rigged to the TV set or the mirror or something, because the electrician, when he put the mirror on the wall, he said, "Doesn't that look like a computer?" The back of it, and he stuck it to the wall. Then when I had 3 meetings with Miss Villacorta on it, every meeting I had, she increased the pressure of the volume of the comm, increased the harassment on the floor, increased the trays being inedible.
Did that affect your mind in some way, the sonic?
It was crushing my head, and they were using sonic pressure continually. I didn't do anything as wrong as they said. I did the right thing. And I saved a lot of people's butts from getting hurt and raped and killed too. You sabotaged my society and the cops and the system. A raped woman got executed. It was used for books and movies and shit. Bladder climbs, the election, everything else like this, and getting rich off it all these years in total pathological lying. Yeah, thanks a lot. I lost my fucking life because of it. Couldn't even get a fair trial. Couldn't even get a fair investigation or nothing. You don't take fucking human life like this and just sabotage and rip it apart like Jesus on the cross and say thanks a lot for all the fucking money I made off of you. And not care about a human being and the truth being told. Not know what Jesus was going through. Thanks a lot, society, for railroading.
Okay. So, there is something that is not really mentioned in Aileen Wuornos' story that I thought was extremely interesting when I did my research. Now, yes, Aileen Wuornos was abused. Yes, she's been abused from birth, pretty much. And, well, we all know that the Illuminators that run society like to have us all MK Ultra, trauma abused, mind control. And for those who are already trauma abused, they are made patsies for a lot of mind control type of crimes. Now, the husband she married, which is not spoken of too much, Louis Gratz Fell. Okay? This guy was president of the Keystone Coal Company, and he was also the president of a yacht club. I mean, I suspect that he was some sort of speculative Freemason. Today's pseudo Freemasons that run the world. We all know they're not the original deal. And so, in my search on this guy, I did find a few interesting things about just his name. Okay, so here we have Louis. This is a Freemason name term, which is basically a device that lifts up heavy stones and smooth stones that you can't move by hand. So this is the Louis. He's the hook in this device right here, right? Okay. Okay, so I have it here that Louis also is a term or name used for the son of a Freemason. Louis is a Mason who is the son of a Mason. And so, yeah, supposedly a special recognition for following his father's footsteps. So here we have evidence that Louis Gratz fell, and you can actually look at the name. Louis Gratz fell. Now, I know a little bit of Latin, little Latin terms, a little Spanish. I know gratis means free. We all know fell means to fall. Something fell, past tense. This Freemason, son of the Freemason, free fell. Now, we all know God is the original Freemason. Okay, that's the only Freemason. Son of Freemason, free fell. This is a direct name meaning Lucifer. So this is something that you guys will not hear mentioned in any of the stuff. You got to do your research. You got to know your history. You got to know a little bit of the stuff. Okay, so you don't make it far in this world. You don't get to that high level in society to be the president of a yacht club, to be the president of a coal company, major resource on the planet, and not have been bent over and taken it by Lucifer. You can't make it that high up in life when society is ruled by these pseudo-masons. Yeah, I don't know about you, but Aileen Wuornos is a hero, whether you know it or not. Her life was sacrificed in this program, and she gave us all the clues that we needed to have to figure this out. This government corruption, this technological corruption, this technocracy, it started so many years ago, it's not even funny. Okay? So, with that said, her husband, the spell guy, Lucifer, for someone who has been hooking, prostituting, using sex to survive, you have to understand that she was subjected to, or they tried to subject her to, some really bizarre sexual practices for her to take this man's cane and beat him with it. Okay? This is out of the norm. They probably tried to use her in some sort of ritual, and she wasn't having it. She's been on the run from these people for seemingly all her life. And so she talks about the sonic pressure, the computer. The place she talks about, BCI, which today means brain-computer interface, which these people like to mark their work. They sign their work with keywords, clues, because they think the population is too dumb to figure this out. For the most part, they're right. But we have to do our best to educate and get through this stuff. So I want to say thank you, bless you, Aileen Wuornos. You were a feminist before your time. You actually fought and fought and fought in your other situation, but you just were controlled and pushed into a direction, which is what is happening. That's the theme of this entire documentary. People being controlled to kill. To kill for what? So let's go a little bit deeper into the past. I want to alert you to the first targeted individual Well, the first target individual harassed by frequencies anyways.
He seemed to be the all-American boy, but dark thoughts clouded the mind of Charles J. Whitman.
An urge to kill that he couldn't stop.
On August 1st, 1966, he barricaded himself at the top of the clock tower at the University of Texas and began shooting.
There's no report as to who this man may be, or what he's doing up there, or what prompted this apparent madness.
He had the whole program set up for himself. He was in a killing field, and he was the killer.
In 96 minutes, Charlie Whitman gunned down 45 strangers, killing 14. It was a murder spree that changed America forever. Officer Martinez went outside, backed up by Houston McCoy, armed with a shotgun, and Alan Crum.
I fired a shot at him right away. He started firing. It was tow, 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 just that quick.
And I kept advancing and shooting and emptied my gun. McCoy was behind me at the time with the shotgun, and he shot him.
And I remember his mouth was open, and saw that sniper alive just for, he just kind of slid down in my mind's eye, and this is just what I see now, you know, that as he was sliding down, I kind of see that rifle was dropping out of his hand.
Officer Martinez threw down his empty gun and grabbed his colleague's shotgun. He ran to Whitman and fired at point-blank range. The clock in the tower read 1:24. In the aftermath of the mass murder in Austin, some who knew Charles Whitman were shocked and amazed.
He was always kidding and joking and just full of life, and I liked to be around him.
Bad enough with what he did with people, but the idea of killing Kathy and his mother just seemed incomprehensible because he just cared so much about them.
They also found the self-regarding writings of Charles Whitman.
I wonder if I will ever taste the sweet honey of success for myself and my loved ones. As I look back over my past few adult years, they seem so wasted. Will I ever accomplish anything I set forth to do?
At the top of one page, he had written, "I never could make it. These thoughts are too much for me." It was dated the day of the massacre. In one of his lengthy notes, Whitman asked that an autopsy be carried out. He was convinced that something was physically wrong with him. As it turned out, he was right. Pathologists discovered that he had a brain tumor.
It was determined that he had a glioblastoma multiforme, which is a later stage, virulent, aggressive, malignant tumor.
And they said that that tumor was adjacent and involving a structure called the amygdala. And it's not uncommon for people with tumors of the amygdala to have rage episodes or rage attacks.
One of the symptoms of this type of tumor is hypergraphia, an uncontrollable urge to write.
I don't quite know what compels me to write this letter. I don't really understand myself these days.
He felt very strongly that he just had to write. And although it may have been incriminating, he couldn't control it.
On the evening of June 31st, 1966, he typed a suicide note, saying that he'd been a victim of many unusual and irrational thoughts. Whitman requested an autopsy on his body to discover whether there were biological reasons for the terrible crimes he was about to commit. As the clock struck midnight on August 1st, Whitman went to his mother's house in Austin, knocked her out, and stabbed her to death. He then returned home, and as his wife Kathy slept, stabbed her 3 times through the heart. Medical examiners discovered a tumor in Whitman's brain, marked by a small necrosis. The coroner rules it had no influence on his actions. That result was revised by a commission held by Texas Governor John Connally. An inquiry on August 5th that year heard the tumor could have had an impact on Whitman. Pathologists found the tumor may have pressed against the amygdala region of Whitman's brain, known to influence fight or flight responses. The tumor may have affected Whitman's ability to control his emotions and actions. While the experts could not agree on the reasons for Whitman's murderous acts, One thing was abundantly clear. A sense of innocence had been shattered, and the United States would never be the same again.
The first mass killer in America, Charles Whitman. This man, the clock tower shooter, was indeed the first targeted visual mass shooter. How can I prove this? Well, despite there not being any knowledge of frequency technologies back then to the public, after Operation Paperclip, the mind control scientists, the director energy weapons scientists that Nazi Germany had, that we grabbed and brought to America, the majority of them went to the University of Texas, Austin and San Antonio. I know this. I lived in Austin. I grew up in Austin, Texas. I know the history. And this is, you gotta connect the dots. This is very apparent. Now, I don't care what you want to say about his personal life or anything like that. I wouldn't go past the psychology into the physical evidence. The man had a tumor in his brain. Now, the government wants to say that, oh, well, there was a tumor in his brain that was pushing up against his medulla oblongata, so he became aggressive. Sorry, that just doesn't cut the mustard. Any parts of the brain that are squeezed out, choked out, have a loss of blood flow in them, and they don't work correctly, meaning they work less effectively. So if a tumor was pushing up against his medulla oblongata, he would have been the most passive person in the world. The fact is that the voice of the skull being beamed into him, the modulated voice beams going to his head gave him a tumor. This is why the government switched from using ionizing radiation to non-ionizing radiation to not leave that evidence. So they had to pull in a politician on this to say, oh, well, it was the tumor. I'm sorry, politician's not a doctor. You know, he's being told to say what he needs to say by whatever seal Freemason master he has. So, I want to go into an example of this really quickly. Okay, so the tumor in this guy's brain was not the cause, but a symptom. His medulla oblongata was being beamed to make him aggressive. Come on, people. It's so easy to put this stuff together. So who else knew about this technology? Who else is doing the research out there? Because mainstream journalism is crap. They can only say what they're told to say, what they're allowed to say. But there are people like me who are of independent media who actually do real journalism. So, what would the average researcher find on this?
I did a whole series of reports on this back when the Navy Yard shooter happened because he was having the same types of issues, and he actually scratched my ELF weapon into the gun he used to go on a shooting rampage. And he went to a bunch of places, including a Buddhist temple leading up to this, and begged people for help because he was hearing voices in his head that were telling him to do things. But let's talk about this woman here. Remember this woman who reportedly rammed the gate at the White House? They tried to get her out of the car. I've actually slowed this footage down right here, and they said she was the only one in the car. Her kid was in the back seat. If you slow this footage down as she's veering away, making all these little twists and turns right there down in DC, it looks like she's driving the car straight from a freaking action movie, right? Because you can just drive like that. Everyone just has those skills. If you slow that down, by the way, right there, you can clearly see there's two people in the front seat of that car. I'm just telling you. Go do it for yourself. Clearly it's obvious. Okay? But this woman was a dental hygienist who suddenly heard Obama's voice in her head. How is it that we just seem to have this situation where you've got all these people that just suddenly come down with random mental illnesses in their 30s and think they hear voices in their head, and that the government's targeting them and telling them to hurt people? And then you have mass shootings, and it's always right before something important is going to happen. Like this happened last night, and then it ended up taking a lot of the news away today about the amnesty thing that's going on.
Okay, everybody, hey, I just wanted to make a video on this while I was doing some of my other research. Like most of y'all have been probably staying up to date on the ever-changing information coming out with the Florida suspect in the shooting that just took place. And an article just came across my feed that said, Florida suspect said he heard voices telling him to carry out massacre, law enforcement sources say. And within the body of the article, it says, the 19-year-old who is accused of killing 17 people and injuring dozens more when he opened fire on a South Florida high school Wednesday afternoon told investigators that he heard voices in his head giving him instructions on what to do to conduct the attack. Law enforcement sources told ABC News the voices were described as demons by these sources. And it just made me think and remember that back in 2013, the Navy Yard shooter reported hearing voices through the walls. In this article, said Alexis' paranoia was in full display again as recently as last month. He complained to police in Newport, RI, about hearing voices speaking to him through the ceiling of his hotel room, seeking to penetrate his body with vibrations from a microwave machine to prevent him from sleeping. He told officers that he had no history of mental illness in his family. At the same time, I also remember, well, here's another article. Same gentleman thought he heard voices. What does it say here? I think it says he was depressed, sleepless, increasingly withdrawn, kind of same MO of somebody who's just socially detached. Guy who loved to throw back Heinekens with his buddies now wanted to be left alone. He told his friend that he was seeing a counselor at the Department of Veteran Affairs, and at one point he hadn't slept in 3 days. In July, his best friend, the man who shared his home with him, told police that Alexis had poured sugar in his gas tank to damage his car. Let's see, let's get down in here. Here we go. According to the police report, he said he was hearing voices coming through the ceiling, voices of 3 people who had been sent to follow him and keep him awake. 3 people who are now using some sort of microwave machine to send vibrations into his body, preventing him from falling asleep. He needed help. Okay, let's continue down this rabbit trail of Schizobeam can put voices in your head from afar. This is an article from Gizmodo. It says non-lethal yet still horribly unpleasant weapons are all the rage these days, from puke rays to pink tasers. So what's next? How about beams that insert voices into your head? Yes, you could be minding your own business, looting a Best Buy during a riot, and all of a sudden there's a voice coming from inside your own brain saying, we're really disappointed in you. This goes into talk about, it's a pretty insane idea, but one that's exactly been proven to work, at least in basic form. And this is a little bit more of it in theory. And I'll show you a couple more articles that talk specifically about the technology. It says, because the frequency of sound heard is dependent of the pulse characteristics of the RF energy, it seems possible that this technology could be developed to the point where words could be transmitted to be heard like the spoken word, except that it could only be heard within a person's head. In one experiment, communication of the words from 1 to 10 using speech-modulated microwave energy was successfully demonstrated. Microphones next to the person experiencing the voice could not pick up the sound. Additional development of this would open up a wide range of possibilities. This technology requires no extrapolation to estimate its usefulness. Microwave energy can be applied at a distance, and the appropriate technology can be adopted from existing radar units. Aiming devices likewise are available, but for special circumstances which require extreme specificity. There may be a need for additional development. Extreme directional specificity would be required to transmit a message to a single hostage surrounded by his captors. Signals can be transmitted long distances, hundreds of meters, using current technology. Longer distances and more sophisticated signal types will require more bulky equipment, but it seems possible to transmit some of the signals at closer ranges using man-portable equipment. Holy crap. Let's look at an article in Wired magazine. A voice only you can hear, DARPA sonic projector. Imagine a weapon that creates sound that only you can hear. Science fiction? No, this is one area that has a very solid basis in reality. The Air Force has experimented with microwaves that create sounds in people's heads, which they've called a possible psychological warfare tool. And American Technologies can beam sounds to specific targets with their patented hypersound. And yes, I've seen them demonstrate the speakers, and they are shockingly effective. Now the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency is jumping on the bandwagon with their new sonic projector program. If I remember correctly, didn't Google buy Boston Dynamics? Aren't they connected with DARPA and a lot of this technology? And I believe they sold off Boston Dynamics, but I'm pretty sure they probably maintained some of that technology. And Eric Schmidt, who really was doing the bidding for Hillary Clinton and the DNC, who's just recently resigned, is this a form of warfare that's taking place within the deep state, via this technology that exists out there, and exploiting an individual who is already on the radar of mental health, or already on the radar of the FBI as of last year, for making threats, for wanting to shoot up a school? It seems like the perfect candidate to be used, to have this type of technology used on them. I believe the shooter's mother, adopted mother, passed away in November. The adopted father had passed away something like over a decade ago. Clearly, this individual has serious mental health issues, more than likely on various antipsychotic and antidepressant drugs that have side effects of psycho behavior. You combine that with a technology that can beam in voices into somebody's head, and do you get somebody so can you push somebody over the edge that they go and shoot up the Navy Yard and then talk about the voices in their head? Can that same technology be used on a 19-year-old who's predisposed for this type of, who's susceptible to this type of technology and influence, and where he talks about the voices in his head? It seems very suspicious. There's a lot of suspicious information coming out on this story. You know, there is clearly a lot taking place behind the scenes. I know this is a slightly different video than what I'm used to putting out. You know, I really absorb a lot of media and a lot of wanting to understand what is going on in the world, and that is on not only a spiritual level, but even within this paradigm that we are fed. You know, this theater that is being paraded in front of us is reality, is manufactured. And it's manufactured on multiple levels. Sometimes we have things that are complete false flags. We have hoaxes. We have real events that take place that are orchestrated, that are covered up. There is a battle and a war for us in our minds. And this information, you know, information has been weaponized. And this is just another red flag and something that just caught my attention, and I wanted to put it out there. I probably won't be the only person who sees this connection, but I definitely wanted to go on record pointing it out. Let me know what you guys think. Thanks.
You cannot believe anything the government tells you behind any disaster. Never believe it, because they're always going to lie to you, because they're behind everything.
Yes, folks, the headline that you've just seen is true. We just learned about a man who has killed many men, women, and children, and he has been charged with murder. So I've actually been told that he was told to do it by God. So our next story is actually not a story, it's an interview with Andrea Yates, another one of God's warriors. Sorry? She's not a warrior. She was found guilty of murder. God told her to kill her children, but she was found accused of murder. Why is that? Oh, sorry people. I'm sorry about that. Andrea Yates is actually, no, she's been put in a mental institution. Because she was found legally insane. Why so? Hearing voices of God. I see. Okay, let's move on. Now, another story from November the 10th, 2007. A man, 21-year-old man in Florida, is accused of killing a 64-year-old man in the hospital. He said that God told him to do it. Stay tuned for more details on this case. Okay, one final case. A woman called Deanna Laney bludgeoned her 2 children to death, and what's her status? She's been found legally insane as well as Andrea Yates, right? Okay, so she crushed the skulls of her 2 children with a rock, and she's insane. I can agree she's insane. Wow, what a confusing news report. We have one guy back in the day, he killed men, women, and children, and he's a warrior of God. And now we have, in the recent times, we have people who talk about hearing voices from God. They're insane, being arrested. What's this world coming to? Not listening to God. Bunch of heathens. Well, one more story. This might change things. Back in 2005, our dear president heard voices from God saying that we should invade Iraq. So, since our president said that he heard voices from God, of course it's true. So pardon the rest of these folks who've been hearing voices from God and have killed in the name of God. Let them go. Let them free.
The only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun.
A gun is simply a tool. People kill people.
Guns are not evil. People do harm to people. People kill people.
Guns kill people. That's what they're designed to do.
Guns don't kill people. Americans kill people.
We don't have a gun problem. We have a criminal problem.
You can make as many laws as you want. People who want guns are going to get them.
I'm your host, V. You can catch me for the next documentary.
Have you ever been followed home at night by a bright star? UAV drone. Have you ever felt like you are being watched? Energy spectrum surveillance. Have you ever heard a buzz in your brain and ringing in your ear? Satellite EEG brain entrainment. Have you ever felt like someone is reading your thoughts? Remote neural monitoring. Have you ever heard voices in your head that were not your own? Voice to skull. Have you ever heard these voices repeat themselves unending? Synthetic audio harassment. Known someone driven mad by the voices till they killed people? CIA. NSA on shelf shooters. We are just people. We are brothers and sisters, fathers and mothers. We are young and old alike. We come from every walk of life and every corner of the world. We are just people. Yet, through all of our diversity, we have found common ground. We stand united as one and divided by zero. The Red Pill Hardcore exposes the truth with the answers.